I'm sitting here laughing. Hi, everybody. It's Cynthia Garrett. Welcome to the Cynthia Garrett podcast. And I'm laughing because I love that new open. For those of you who are watching us on live stream, I'm giggling because Anna, who's behind the scenes tinkering with all things creative, uh, really came up with a great new open. But then my next thought was, you vain, you know, Hoosier. Of course you love that open. It's your face all over it. Give or take a few clips. So it's I so I'm a little bit now, you know, embarrassed to say I love that open. But this is it. And we are here again with another episode to break down some interesting parts of this culture that we live in, this culture of lies that we live in. As always, you're going to get real talk about real issues. And as always, above all things, we're going to try to figure out how those of us who have some real faith live and walk through all of this madness, all of the challenges that get thrown at us, all of the hurts and the pains and the regrets and the things that make us angry and the things that make us want to come out swinging and make us fighting mad. And all of that, has a lot of things to discuss because everything, that exists, it exists because God has an opinion about it that he wants us to actually try to live before we live in our opinion about things or before we live in our flesh about things. So in any case, we're going to jump right in. You're going to get it when we get into it. But this joining me to talk about this topic, this video that we're going to watch, this story that we're going to dive into looking for solutions, are two people that I really love and respect and admire. And I'm always happy when they can be with me because the reality is that, you're better in life when you surround yourself with people who are better in life and better at life. And that's really all I want because those are the people that are going to keep it honest with me and keep it real with me. And that said, those two people happen to be Christina Boudreau, and who's a part of the Whosoever's movement, who's an incredible young woman of God. She's a great sister and friend to me. She's a power evangelist. She is a star, a rising star in the world. I don't even want to say the world of ministry because that would limit her. She's a rising star in this world. She's a voice that needs to be heard. And along with her today to deal with trying to find God's point of view in what we're going to discuss, but also trying to help me find solutions is, well, he's the man I chose to spend my life with. So he's definitely my favorite human being on the planet. He's definitely my favorite man. And for all of you men tuning in, I always tell my sons and all my spiritual sons, my bonus sons, of which I have a couple, my birth son, if you want to copy a man, if you want to emulate someone to be like, look over there, look at Roger Charles. So I'm going to bring them on screen and then we're going to, hello, you guys. There they are. There they are. So for those of you streaming, you now get to see the people that I'm talking about. Christina Boudreau live in Chile. And, that very sultry black background by day is the most incredible ocean with the most incredible sunset ever. And of course, Roger on this screen somewhere. I don't know what your screen looks like. He's, bringing up the rear for us here. You guys, so this week, I went on Laura Ingram's show on Fox, The Ingram Angle. Laura is an incredible woman who's been in the fight for a long time. People love her or hate her because she has an opinion about the truth. I happen to love her because I love anyone who has an opinion about the truth. She's often misunderstood by people that just don't really want to hear the truth, you know? But she's someone who chose to unplug from the matrix a long time ago. And I think I always say game recognizes game. She recognizes that in me, and I recognize it in her. So I feel blessed that that God and our mutual friend Lee Habib put us together. Roger and Christina. So as you guys may know, so I went on Laura this week to talk about teen rage, you know, teen violence. And basically, the conversation starting point was with the video that we're going to play in just a couple of seconds. And I just wanted to preface that to say, I really wanted to talk about this in a situation where we could really unpack God's point of view. And God's point of view is always about solutions, right? On a news show, you know, I go on, I'm there for a 3-minute hit. You know, we can get a little bit to the problem. But for those of you who know me, I'm fairly loquacious and I talk a lot. So it's very difficult to do anything. It's very difficult for me to say hello in 2 or 3 minutes. But, you know, because of being able to go on Laura's show on Fox News, I'm getting better at it slowly. I feel like she's so patient, you know, with me and the learning curve for news. I'm used to having my own long form shows where we get to talk more and dialogue more. But I really wanted to talk more about this issue because this is a really big deal in our country right now. On the date of recording this podcast, this girl's life hangs in the balance. And it's not the only situation that we keep seeing, not just in our country, but all around the world, is this sort of anger and rage in young people. And one of the things I said was, I think that there is hopelessness for a younger generation today. They don't have any hope, and hopelessness leads to anger, and anger leads to rage. And rage is just uncontrolled violence. And I think we're seeing a lot of that. And I think, you know, it makes me ask God, what do we do? What can we do? You know, so let's take a look at this video. Roger, I know you've seen it. Christina, you haven't, and I'm really happy that you haven't. Christina's in Chile, so she hadn't heard about even this story yet, which I love.
I don't know what's happening in half the world right now.
No, and I love that because I know that we're going to get your fresh perspective, and I love your perspective. So, Anna, why don't you swish our faces to the side and cue up the video for those of you listening? Pay attention.
We've seen so many viral videos that have circulated over the last really 3 or 4 years that show adults going from 0 to 60 in their emotions. You see them brawling in parking lots, kids' sporting events. So it shouldn't surprise any of us when kids mimic this behavior. So why does it seem that so many young people today are raging out of control? Maybe they have bad examples everywhere. Like this video over the weekend from St. Louis, Missouri, where a group of girls got into a vicious fight. Someone videoed it, and I have to warn you, the footage you're about to see is disturbing. Just a moment later, the girl on top smashed the victim's head into the ground at least 3 times. The teen is now in critical condition after suffering a severe head injury. And a 15-year-old was arrested and charged with assault. Assault. A lot more than an aggravated battery. Joining me now is Cynthia Garrett, founder of the Cynthia Garrett Ministries.
Okay, you can cut it there. We don't need to hear me on the video because we're about to hear me right now with Roger and Christina. Well, okay, so they don't show, you didn't get to see the full video, Christina. I wish that we actually had it or had for you to see, because what happens is that girl who was on top of the other girl literally picked up her head almost like a cartoon, because she pinned her like a rag doll, and she picked up her head and she slammed it down into the concrete just like this, over and over and over again. And the girl's head, you know, is shattering. And the girl goes out and literally starts seizing. She's in a full-on, she's dying. She's in a full-on seizure. And the mob that's watching them starts fighting with each other, laughing. They jump over her, they step over her. They're in their own big mob thing. And she's laying on the ground, literally shaking violently in seizure. She is 16 years old, the victim. The girl on top of her is allegedly 15 and has been taken into custody. And the girl whose head was smashed into the concrete repeatedly is in a hospital. She has frontal lobe brain damage. She has a cracked skull. She's got numerous things going on, brain bleeding. She's fighting for her life. They do not know if she will come to. And when she does come to, they don't know what the extent of the damage actually is. Her name is Kaylee Gain. She's a Missouri high school student. And the fight was actually near Hazelwood East High School, right? This happened on March 8th. It's I mean, she's literally laying there on the ground, while the kids run around and continue this behavior. This is a tragedy of epic proportions, and bullying and fighting seems to be an issue that we all need to take ownership of. And I there's so many levels to this, because I think as grown-ups in the world today, we are literally setting an example of bullying, and calling names and expressing anger openly and immaturely, on a political level, even.
Yeah.
And, you know, it's not really about who you want for president.
Mm.
It's more about the realization. Some people say, well, Donald Trump started all of this, the name calling, oh, look at our nation. People who are against Trump say, look at our nation, it's divided because of him. And I say, no, our nation is not divided because of him. We have just seen the ugliness inside of all of us that was still there, that existed because of him. And just because someone else shines a light on my sin doesn't mean it's not my sin. And so, there used to be a day where people would say, well, when they go low, we go high. Well, let me just say, they're all liars. Nobody goes high. Nobody goes high. And in a lot of ways, a lot of this is to blame for how low these kids are going. But that's like the tip of the iceberg, right? I think hopelessness, you know, hopelessness. These kids don't have any hope of a future. And it's easy for us to say, well, because Christina, you and I and Roger know what they need. They need Jesus, man. They need to understand the power of God. They need to understand what God wants for their lives, because then they would have the vision for their lives. But you have a whole generation of kids who've had prayer stripped out of their schools. They're being told, as children, that they can pick their own sex. So they're being completely empowered to do what thou will, lack of a better way of putting it, right? Do whatever they want. They think they're in control. And then there's this whole social media, uh, you know, environment where, in a way, do they really like when they go viral? Is there some pressure to be, you know, it's pride. Like, I gotta be a certain thing. I gotta be the victor. I have to beat her up, because I'm angry, and I have to win because people are watching. And man, what the heck are we supposed to do as a society in response to that? And this is where I believe, people of God, you need to get to talking about solutions. What are the solutions? What's going on? Christina, you deal with youth all the time. I want to start with you. What do you see in the youth culture that you're dealing with? What is missing? Why are they here? Why don't they value life? Why don't they value themselves? Why don't they value their bodies? You know, why don't they value what they were born as?
Yeah. You know, Cynthia, it's so interesting as I'm seeing that video of that girl smash that girl's face into the ground. Like, I I don't know. I don't usually share this very often. When we're on tour, like in the detention centers, I do like, but you know, I think when I was seeing that girl basically smash that girl's head into the ground, I was wondering like what, and this is just because of the work that I do with the youth, right? I was thinking, what has she gone through that would possess her to do something like that? What has, and I say that because there's always something, like when I see kids acting out, like every time like we're in like the detention centers, like talking to these kids that are like have 5-10 years because they've killed someone. And sometimes I'm like, what possesses you? And when you really dig deep into their stories, like that is really what motivates so much of the violence in the youth today. And specifically like um even like there's a detention center that we go up here in our area that I live in here in Chile, and these kids that are in there, there's this one house we go to where it's like these kids are in there because they've like they've killed people, right? But a lot of them, when you start digging deep into their stories, like the stuff that they have gone through, the trauma, the trafficking with the cartels, the abuse, the abandonment, like some of them just like repeated rape and abuse from family members. It's almost like they're like ticking time bombs. They don't know what else to do with all that anger. And so unfortunately, they go and they like beat up on someone, kill someone, assault someone, right? And so like even for me, like when I was, I think just shy of 10 years old, or it was like around the age of 10, like I was in 5th grade. I was at a Christian school, by the way. My parents sent me to a private Christian school. I, just had a lot of abuse and trauma growing up. And I was at ticking time bomb, and I went to school. And I remember the night before specifically taking all that anger and writing letters to kids at school, telling them that I was going to kill them and their families, and going to school the next day and putting them in students' desks, not knowing like exactly like what I was planning on doing. Like I was like so young, but all I remember was that the vice principal of my elementary school was an ex-police chief that somehow retired and said, I'm going to be, vice principal of the school. So he brings me in his office and he asks me, did you write these letters? And I was like, no, I didn't write those letters. And I don't remember everything. I just remember denying everything and him saying, Christina, like when we fingerprint these letters, right? Like we could see who wrote them. And I remember the pastor of my elementary school coming in, who like would see me at chapel every week, right? Like he saw just who I was on a normal day, basically came because the cops showed up and I was supposed to go to juvenile hall at least until high school, because no one takes that like seriously. But I remember at that time, I just remember like just completely turning inward. I was so lost. I was so broken. I was so like um I don't remember all the emotion, but I just remember I was lost and broken. But basically, my parents came and they were like, "There's no way she would have done this." But I remember the pastor making a plea deal for me, where basically I ended up going to a program instead of going to juvenile prison. And this
Wow.
program involved like horses, it involved counseling, it involved therapy, all of those things. And when I think back to being that girl who was writing, like, and really what it was God's grace on my life. I believe it was the Lord speaking to this pastor of my elementary school and saying, like, this isn't Christina, like there's something deeper. And so I believe that's a lot of what the counseling was, is that they were trying to figure out like what possesses a girl that's barely 10 to all of a sudden start threatening that she's going to kill kids and their families at school. And But I remember, obviously, like, my mind at that time was not in a place where I could even process the trauma that was happening to me on a weekly basis, because it was still happening as I was going to counsel, this program. Like, I just was not in a place. And when I think about, like, even my horses I had over the last 3 years, one of the horses specifically coming off of Santa Anita racetrack, a lot of abuse and a lot of how he acted out, like, he was actually a very violent horse, was because a lot of what he endured. But beneath all of that, like, through months of just like me working with him and trainers, he became an amazing horse, and he still is an amazing horse. And when I think about what the Lord did in my life, like, it was only the Lord that could do what he did in my life, and that to to be where I am now. Like, taking a
Right.
girl at the age of 10 is like threatening to kill people at school, right?
Right. Right.
To and I'm supposed to have gone to juvenile hall, right? To the Lord completely transforming my life. But really what it was that there's so much, I just remember, I don't remember everything from that night, but I just remember there was so much anger, so much, like, my parents, when they looked at the letters, I remember, like, in hindsight, I don't remember everything, but I just remember writing the letters in all capitals and using every profane word that I knew, like every cuss word, and my parents being like, yeah, she doesn't talk like that. But all of that was in me. And I
Right.
put all of that on paper. And so whether that's on paper or whether that's someone beating up someone else,
Right.
I think of that girl who obviously, right, like, she physically acted out. So yeah, she needs to serve time and go to
Yeah.
counseling and figure out. But the only one that can change that girl that's acting out, and the only one that can change the youth that are going out and defacing, I think it's defacing or defaming public property, like all, like, the raids happening in LA and all these big cities, and all the young people that are, like, with Antifa and, like, all of those people, those are all young people, right, that are being recruited. Like, even I watched Candace Owens, like, documentary she did on, like, the behind the scenes of, Black Lives Matter. How she brought
Yeah.
everything to light. That basically all the nonprofits that were listed on Black Lives Matter's nonprofit that they sent money to were really recruiting websites where they were recruiting youth to go and burn things and beat up on people. And it's like all of that rage, right? The only thing that can really, like, when you think of, like, people, like, we have specific units, right, within our police force or the military that go in and, like, diffuse bombs that could potentially go off and bring destruction to a lot of people. The only one that can really do that within the hearts of our very angry, very troubled, very youth who are hurting, who have been abused and abandoned and broken homes, the only one that could do that is Christ, like, his
Yeah.
love and the gospel, because the Lord did that for me. Like, what 10-year-old goes to school and says they're going to start killing people and their families? Like, that is a very dark thing. And the
Yeah.
stuff that's happening today, like, only the love of Christ can really transform the hearts of the youth, like, only he could do that. No counseling can do that. No pills, no amount of pills that can numb people out can do that. What do they
Right.
do to people in psych hospitals that are violent? They drug them up,
They drug
but
them
it
up.
doesn't deal with the issue, because LA and, all the big cities are just filled with all the homeless people that are, like, completely out of their minds, right? And so it's like only the love of Christ can do that. And that's what I think, is that there's so much I don't want to say compassion, but there's so much, like I have a heart for those kids. Like, I mean, the detention centers we go to here, even in Mexico and the US, are filled with, like, kids that are in the cartel that have killed, like, 20 something people,
Oh,
like, big
wow.
kids that have come to Christ. Like, the kids here, like, where I'm at, a lot of them are from, like, Venezuela, and there's a community up the hill where I'm at where only certain people can go into those communities, because there's, like, body parts that people chop up. Like, they disfigure people and they leave them, like, in the community, because that's how, like, violent people are here. And so, like, the only one that can really but I've seen the Lord transform those kids
Right.
that are chopping up bodies, you know, like
Right.
only the Lord could do that, because when you dig beneath the surface of why they did what they did, they all have crazy, really gnarly, really crazy stories that they take all of that and unfortunately they destroy and they bring destruction. So
Right.
yeah, sorry, that was a long rant, but that's just like kind of at least maybe that perspective, you know. And I'm not saying people don't need to go juvie, because people do. Like if people are doing stuff, they need to get help, they need to serve time, they shouldn't be out there doing those things. But that's more to shed light on like maybe why people do what they do, and that Christ is the only way.
Well, before I go to you, Raj, that's it kind of leads me to my next point, because, you know, I have it on good authority that in a lot of these schools, you know, where these
Yeah.
kids, these alleged kids are in St. Louis and around the country, they're a lot of the policies and the you know, the sort of the training for diversity, inclusion, and equity that's going on in these schools is based in Deep Equity, a book by Gary Howard. And basically, they're being told not to write up the Black kids when they get into trouble. And which to me is the deepest form of racism disguised as like, you know, well, it's really the left that really endorses these policies. It's very liberal, fake love, I call it, because it is not love. Like if I let my child run buck wild, kill people, beat up people, and there are no consequences, I don't love him. I'm just lazy. I don't want to deal with him, or I want to see him take himself out of the equation. I want to see him go so crazy and behave so poorly, he takes himself out of the equation. And so when I look at that video and I see that girl, I'm like, okay, I see the hopelessness that, as you really described, you had hopelessness that led to anger, like deep, dark anger by 10 years old, right? That leads, I believe, to rage. And what is rage? Uncontrolled violence. What do we see happening with these young people? What did we see happening? It was uncontrolled violence. Like you could just see that she wasn't even in her right mind at that point. And, you know, if the other little girl dies, and there's a very strong possibility that she might, the attorney general in Missouri wants to try this 15-year-old as an adult. And you know what that means. That's sort of, okay, we can't rehabilitate her, send her to prison for life. And a lot of emotion, you know, comes up, I think, in a lot of people, where you would look at that situation and go, yeah, she deserves to go to prison for life. Try her as an adult. And then the flip side is, Christina, which is why I really wanted your take in this conversation. The flip side is, hey, there's something going on. And if we don't throw her life away, maybe, and if we don't throw an entire generation, an entire race of people away, maybe we can get to the bottom of the pain and the anger and the rage. And it's a big, 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 hard job. And are we doing our job as the church even, you know? So Roger, I think it's time to get your perspective.
Well, here, first of all, I mean, let's just go with God on what the condition of a nation is and isn't. So in Proverbs 28, starting in verse 2, it says, I'm going to read out of the Net Bible because just sometimes they get it right. When a country is rebellious, it actually means full of transgression. It has many princes, but by someone who's discerning and knowledgeable, order is maintained. I'm going to keep going, but I'm going to come back to that. A poor person who oppresses the weak is like a driving rain without food. Those that forsake the law praise the wicked, but those who keep the law contend with them. And evil people do not understand justice, but those who seek the Lord understand it all. And a poor person who walks in his integrity is better than one who is perverse in his ways, even though he's rich. All right, let's go back to verse 2. When a country is in rebellion or transgression, It has many princes. In other words, you need a lot of cops when everybody's lawless.
Mm.
You got to have a lot of cops when everybody's breaking the law.
But well, that's interesting because
No,
but wait, can I just say this? It makes me notice something here. The trend in our nation has been to just get God out of everything and to give a lie that is a counterfeit version of the truth. So, we took prayer in schools. What? Prayer out of schools. We don't want to offend anybody. What does prayer offend? I mean, prayer would unite these kids. They would hold hands and sing kumbaya together. And prayer is about unity. All of what we're seeing in these videos and in our nation is about division. So what's wrong with a little prayer? Give me a break. I mean, it's not about, you know, anything more than like bring God into the situation. God
here's the
is
thing
love.
about here's the problem with that thinking. It's true, and a segment of that thinking is true, but that is not the real problem. That is a symptom of the problem. They took
Well,
prayer out of.
but
Wait, let me explain what this verse is talking about. If you don't have God at the top, it isn't going to get down to the kids. You can have prayer in
right,
school, but if you don't have prayer in the family,
right,
then prayer in school is meaningless.
right.
And the only way you get prayer out of school is when there's enough adults that say, okay. Jesus pointed out something. If you have lust in your heart, you're committing adultery in your heart. What leads to physical adultery is a condition of the heart already being there. What leads to murder, the scripture says? Anger. If you have anger in your heart, it can lead to murder. If you have lust in your heart, it can lead to adultery and all sorts of wicked sins, right? Stealing the
Right.
car because you lust, taking somebody's wife because you lust, or husband. So when we lose God's perspective, then we just start to break the law and we think it's okay. Well, it was a white lie. It didn't hurt anybody. Well, it was stealing, but it was just a pencil. No, if you go 10 miles over the speed limit, what's your child going to do?
Go 20
No.
miles over.
So where does this start? Starts with the leadership in the home, leadership in the government. So the government does, according to this, have something to do with it because it says when there's sin, there's a lot of rulers. But by one person that has understanding and knowledge, order is maintained. By the way, regardless of all the other nonsense with Trump, he's like law and order. I'm the law and order president. Good. By the way, if that girl goes to jail for the rest of her life, will her friends beat anybody else against the concrete? No, they won't.
Probably not. Yeah.
It isn't about the girl, unfortunately, in society. It's about the girl that did the deed, but it's also about everybody else. If that girl gets away with scot-free and gets let out, then let's all beat everybody's head against the concrete.
Well, that's kind of the point where I was going with we have a government that took prayer out of schools. We have a government that, think about what came out of the pandemic. Defund the police. I mean, the police are needed in these communities. They're needed. They're needed. The exact opposite is what God would say, which is when a nation is in turmoil, increase the police force. Now, you are right. There's also a heart condition and a heart problem in our
And it
nation.
starts from the top.
And it starts from the top.
Lincoln was a lawyer. So Cynthia, because you're a lawyer, even though you're not practicing, that takes a lot of work and a lot of brain power. But he learned to read with the Bible. There's no way during that time they would ever dream of taking the Bible and prayer out of school. Their whole thinking back then was trying to be based in the Bible. Now, there's always evil people that try and use the Bible for wrong reasons. I'm not talking about that. But the people that feared God and had a relationship with God, these are the people that lead from a high place.
Yeah.
That's why Lincoln said, if a white man has to die for every stripe that a whip laid on a black man to right this wrong, so be it. Because he understood the law had been broken.
Mm.
Men were treated as slaves and like worse than a cow by other men. And that wrong had to be righted. So
Right.
nearly 400,000 guys died in the North to free slaves.
Right.
It isn't, look, at the end of the day, for repentance to happen, Christina and Cynthia, of course you're right. The only way is Jesus, period. But when you hold up the ultimate authority, right, in his righteousness, now you have something to compare to. Now the kid that wants to go 50 miles an hour over the speed limit has somebody who's saying righteous things. So when I hold up Jesus, I would never hold up myself for someone, hey, just do what I do. No, do what Jesus did. I want to hold up the ultimate man of righteousness and say, follow him, know him, be like him. And there's a chance that somebody in their evil, by the way, people are really in evil places. No, they're in the evil condition, right?
I don't know. I don't actually agree with you on that. I see a lot of people who are plugged into the matrix of evil conditions and they don't know that they're plugged in. They don't know. For whatever reason, their minds are seared, their conscience
Sure, there's
is
that.
seared. They
There is
weren't
that, and
raised,
we
they
should
weren't
talk
raised with
about
it.
we should talk about conscious being seared. We really should,
Well,
because that's part of this.
that is part of it because we have a generation of young people. I mean, it started with me. I remember, getting to a point where you kind of go, wow, this is really violent, but like the violence is almost cartoon like now. It's so extreme. There's so much violence in our movies and on TV shows and even in our cartoons and in our dialogue and on social media that you have a whole generation of young people. I mean, think about they're 15 and 16 years old, you guys, these kids. These were like young high school kids, young,
Right.
barely out of middle school. And this girl is laying on the ground, that little girl laying on the ground in full-on convulsions because her brain has been beaten to death, basically, darn near. And they don't even notice her. They're too busy filming with their iPhones and fighting each other and yelling and screaming and whatever they're doing. It's like an angry mob of cattle. And that is symptomatic of an underlying, sickness in our
And
nation.
again, I'm going to say that it's parents, it's leaders, so I've known parents that sit down with their 8-year-old boys, dads who sit down with their 8-year-old boys and watch porn. I've seen so many things, watching, super sick horror films where their parents have their kids watch with them. And like it's their Saturday night thing, watching guts flying everywhere. There's many things that parents do that cause kids to both get their conscience seared and also get their mindset set. I'll never forget, there used to be a television show called Dragnet, and there was a movie called Dragnet, and there was even a spoof movie called Dragnet, which is about the FBI catching these bad guys. And before all that, long before any of us were born, there was a radio show back in the days where they did dramas on radio. And it was Dragnet back then in the 30s. And in the 30s, so this is 90 years, not even 85 years ago, these Dragnet shows were real cases. They were dramatizations of real cases. And this is the number 2, the second one on the radio. So you can look this up yourself in the radio show of Dragnet. And the show is about these FBI agents trying to catch this guy who had taken photographs of a girl when she was 18 naked. Now, she did this willingly, but this evil, wicked guy, and the whole radio show is about them catching this guy finally and putting him in jail for 20 years. Your conscience is seared. My conscience is seared. They put a guy away for taking a photograph of an adult. She was a teenager, but she was an adult for 20 years. This guy went to jail for this. Now you have teenagers posting videos of themselves, photographs of themselves naked. You have people doing all sorts of wicked things. How seared is the conscience becoming when you can't even tell that a lie or stealing or even worse, being violent is not bad, right?
Right.
But still, held up to Jesus, it all becomes very clear. When you see his teaching, love your enemies. What? Even the conscience that's seared is going to say, what? If you look on a woman to lust after her, you've committed adultery in your heart. What? When you've been trained from an 8-year-old to watch porn, Jesus still is the light that shines in the darkness.
Listen, you're right. Yes. But, I kind of feel like we have a lot of people who don't believe in Jesus, who are engaged in this problem. We live in a nation of people with many faiths and many belief systems. Some of those people have no belief system and they have no faith. I have to believe those are the ones who want to stop using the term pedophile and replace it with the term, MAP, minor attracted person, and make it a normal category of sexual attraction to be, attracted to children. It's sick, but it exists, And so when you're in that situation, my question then is, well, what is the solution? What do we do? Because the reality is something has to be done. And, if people don't know, they don't know. If people aren't invested in reading the Bible because they want to know the difference in right and wrong as determined by God, and that's just the simple, plain fact of it, then what do? They follow the teachings of men. They follow their own wisdom and their own logic. They live for their own flesh. I look at celebrities all day long who, thank God at award shows and call themselves Christians, but then they turn around and do music videos or movies where they're naked or they're dressed in, straight up, let's worship the devil attire with the baffle fats and the, listen, all you got to do is look at it, Taylor Swift has done it. Beyonce's done it. Dr. Dre's done. Not Dr. Dre. Jay-Z. They've all done it. They've all gone dark, even in their videos. And even people that I know and love who've done it, in the season in which they did it, they were going along with what they thought would keep them relevant in culture. They were selling a lie instead of the truth. They were all a part of selling a lie instead of the truth. And that's really what made me sicken to Hollywood. I didn't want to be a part and become famous and wealthy for selling lies instead of truth. I was like, there's got to be a way to be famous and wealthy for selling the truth. And maybe there isn't, because Lord knows Jesus wasn't very, very wealthy. Now, he's certainly famous. I defy anybody to tell me that anyone on this earth is more talked about, argued about, debated, contested, invited, shunned, rejected, all of it than Jesus. Nobody. It's more famous than everybody. Everybody can say something about Jesus, that the Jesus they know or the Jesus that they don't know, and I believe that we serve, those of us who are believers and Christians, I believe we serve a God of order, and our nation is out of order, which means our nation is not serving God. All of what we've said basically is to say that, right? How do we get our nation serving God when our leaders aren't really serving God? Every time Biden or someone in our current administration says, "Oh, I'm a Catholic," or I'm a Christian, basically, you talk about violent. I want to throw the television out the second floor, because I'm like, no, you're not. You're sowing division. You're sowing hate. Every time you open your mouth and you badmouth another candidate, or every time you lump on some more evil on another candidate or another, person in politics, you're just at the top setting an example of division and hatred, and it's violent to assault someone's life. Trump is the victim of a whole lot of violence, if you ask me. I've never seen anybody as persecuted as him, who's still standing up and who hasn't become a babbling idiot, for Pete's sake, just getting up. I'd be crying every day. Like, oh my God, nobody has anything nice to say about me. And that's not true, but certainly the media portrays it that way. So what are the solutions in all of this? I think that, having leaders who at bare minimum love our country, is that's a great place to start. Having leaders who at bare minimum have some relationship with God is a good place to start. But, it's harder for a rich man to enter the kingdom of heaven than for a camel to get through the eye of a needle. So when is someone going to be not just a start, but the completion of what we need in leadership? Because we need solutions. What are those solutions?
We have to start with ourselves, right?
Yeah.
Loving the law is, I was just going to say, loving the law is not fun, right? But upholding the law will set others to want to as well. They'll see an example of it.
Yeah. Well, there's also something in the Bible called the fear of God. There has to be a fear of consequences.
No, that's higher. You were talking about, but what about a society without God?
Right.
So just like the girl going to jail is one example, also following, and God will bless the man that follows the law or woman.
Yeah.
And seeing that person get blessed, is encouraging,
I agree. Absolutely. Sure. But these kids don't see people get blessed. They're fed, they're fed this victim mentality. They're fed anger. They're raised with anger and violence. And
I gotta believe that the second half of what you said, I think, is the real thing. What has she seen in her life?
That's what Christina said earlier.
Yeah, what has she been subjected to, so on and so forth?
Yeah. Boudreau, you had something?
Yeah, I love what both you and Roger were saying, because it's true. Like, even like Roger, what you were saying, like, it starts from the top down. And like sometimes the top down in the life of a young person is their parents. Like what you're saying, like what you're both saying, like the top down in their life is like coming home to a single parent home where their mom is gone all day long, working double shifts. They have no one raising themselves. They're raising themselves. They're raising their younger siblings. The gangs are raising them. The streets are raising them. And then the top down for them becomes their gang leaders. And then they might show up to school or like, and then they're so lost. And then above that, their top down is like a political government that's then feeding into their confusion, their anger, their depression. But really, like, because the top down is broken, right? Like the government in the US is broken because they've taken out what is supposed to be at the top. They've taken out Christ. So then it's just like a chain effect of like, it's broken. It's broken from the top down. Like I saw it, even my friends, when we were in Mexico on tour, this was in 2 years ago, we were in Puerto Vallarta, and there was just a lot of kids, you know, in the cartels that we were, you know, that go to school, but that do all this other stuff on the side, that deal drugs, you know, all this stuff, dude, kill people, all this stuff. And one of my friends was saying that next to the hotel we were staying at was basically where there's like a big leader. What's his name? There's a big leader in the cartel that's currently in prison in the US. Do you guys know who I'm talking about? The Mexican cartel.
Oh,
who's like in charge of the cartel right now? The bigger one.
right. I'm blank. Come
Yeah,
on.
I forgot
His
who it
famous
is.
name. Yeah.
Yeah, he's a famous name, right?
Yeah.
Basically,
Is it Escobar? No, it's not Escobar. Is it Pablo Escobar?
no, I think Escobar was in Colombia.
Yeah.
He was.
Who?
Yeah, I forgot
Anyway,
who it is. Not
I
Houdini.
know.
I don't know. Someone. So basically, his son was
And not
at.
El Chapo, and not his
El
sons.
Chapo Guzman.
Was it?
Well, he had sons, but
I think El Chapo Guzman is the biggest one that we have, I think, right now in prison. There's probably more. Who knows that we haven't
Oh,
heard
yeah,
of.
no, it's El Chapo.
It's El Chapo.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
his
Yeah.
son was at this restaurant that was next to the hotel we were at. This was like happened like years before. Actually, no, I think it was a year before. And so basically the cops caught wind of it, right? Like the cops and the military surround it, to this restaurant. And basically within 10 minutes, the cartel had that whole city surrounded, all the streets. Because what do? They call other people, and basically they had the restaurant surrounded, the city surrounded, and they called the president of Mexico and they said, unless you surrender the son, we're going to shoot at this whole city. And it was crazy because the government and the president of Mexico surrendered and submitted to the cartel gangsters, right? Which was so crazy. And when I think of that, it's such a big, like, even the good, right? Like the good within the government in Mexico, like the president who's trying to, who's just trying to be a normal president, right? Political figure, keep the people safe, whatever. The good submitted to the bad because the bad had a greater like power over the good, right? Like,
Right.
and I think that's really such a picture of like our government now is that you have the good, right? The good within whatever party, people, and like within the law enforcement, the judges, like all those things. But unfortunately, all the good is submitting to the bad right now because it's like the bad is holding up a gun to the good's head, like what the cartel did to the president of Mexico. And it's saying, unless you yield, this is what we're going to do. And it's just crazy because it's corrupt from the top down. So even if the good is trying to come through, there's so much corruption, there's so much fighting. But really, there's only order. Like when I think of a lot of these broken homes, even where I'm at in Chile, like I can't tell you how many single moms are at the church I'm at over here. And the moms have like 2 and 3 kids with different dads. And I'm just thinking like, where are these kids' dads? Like, where are the fathers, right? But it's only when the father that is first submitted to Christ comes back in, that order is maintained in the home. And when I think about just the US or the world. It's really only when the Father can come in and set everything in order, that order is maintained. Like, right, there's like when you think of a little kid that's disrespecting its mom, when the Father comes in and is like, hey, like kind of what you're saying, Roger, like, I'm gonna put you in order. Like, you do that, you're gonna be, I'm gonna whip you, you're gonna be put in timeout. Like, it's only when there's a fear in someone, like a healthy fear, right? Like the fear of God, the fear of whatever, that order is maintained, because there is accountability. There's people are responsible for their actions. Like they have a moral compass, and the moral compass is gone because they've taken the Father out of the picture. And we now live in a fatherless nation, a fatherless world.
On top of that,
mic drop. Hold on, mic drop. The whole you could answer this whole situation with a question: where is the Father, and where are the fathers?
Yeah,
Roger.
Yeah, they they keep doing this no bail thing, right?
Yeah.
So somebody does a crime and they're out the same day.
Well, in California, you can steal up to $900 and not be prosecuted.
Well,
So,
that's even worse, right?
Yeah, my sister and I have this joke. We're like, we should just go from one store to the next up and down Rodale Drive in Beverly Hills and just steal a $900 wallet here and a $900 this there and because you can't go to jail. Like, it's so stupid, it's just stupid. And it's not about loving people. It's about, that's racist. It's about hating people, because when you're bringing in things that are anti what God would do, which is establish order and chaos, and right, when a nation is in rebellion, where are the police? You bring in the princes, the princes. You need order. You need to establish order. There has to be consequences for evil, or there's no love. That's not love. Hey, let the people just do whatever they want to do. Let them look bad. Let them shoot and kill each other. Let them beat each other. Let them. And I mean, I say to, Black people, I mean, like, wake up. We're dealing with a system that wants you to just look as bad as you can. They have taken what happened with George Floyd and let the anger and the rage and the hopelessness go on steroids. And guess what? When they put everyone on under martial law and on lockdown because we look like a race of animals and thugs, then what are you going to do? Turn around and, is it slavery's fault? Is it the white man's fault? That I mean, really, I'm watching this situation going, and this is the elephant in the room. This is a 15-year-old Black girl who's she's 3 times the size of this little skinny little white girl, and she's like murdering her on camera. It was just as bad. I broke out in tears when I first saw it. I was like, and I cried. It was the same reaction I had when I watched Derek Chauvin choke the life out of George Floyd. It was just as bad. It was just as traumatic. It was just as evil. It was just as ugly. But will there be justice? Because justice is about love. We serve a God of love and justice and mercy and order, right? Raj, you want to take the last word?
Well, actually, you say something that's universal about God. Number one, God is love. Without God, you're not going to have real love. You can have human love, which is fleeting, because it comes and goes with our compassion, our emotion.
Yeah.
So God is love. But not only that, God loves order. He made order. And until God is the head, till he's our chief love, there won't be repentance. There won't be a change of direction.
Right.
Because as somebody said a long time ago, you can't legislate righteousness. Only God can do that. And without him, we would be without hope. And that's where you started. They're hopeless.
Yeah. I mean, our nation is getting hopeless because we've driven God out of the dialogue. Look, whatever you believe, you have to understand the simple powerful truth of this. God is love. God is good, right? You know, even if you're an atheist, you hear Christians say, oh, God is good. Oh, God is love, right? It's because it's true. And it's true for us. And it's the boundary line that exists in my life so that I don't, you know, flip out and bang somebody's head repeatedly into the concrete, because that's insane. That's not loving. That's not kind. That's not godly. That's not human. You know, not as a human is supposed to be connected to God and from God and created in God's image. It's human in terms of just the flesh gone wild. Hopelessness leads to anger, and anger leads to rage. And what is rage? It's uncontrollable violence. And that is what we witnessed, uncontrollable violence. And everything, you know, real talk, real issues, real faith. Well, the real faith of this is that I think the solutions are simple. I think we need to put prayer back in school. And I think we need to, instead of teaching kids that they can choose what sex they are and asking little Johnny if he knows that, you know, how a girl becomes a boy or a boy becomes a girl, instead of like really trying to mess with their heads about issues they're not even old enough to deal with, why don't we mess with their hearts and make them good people? Because whether Johnny thinks he's a girl or a or Kelly thinks she's a boy, I don't care. I care if that child is being raised to be a good person, a good contribution to society. Does that child know the truth of God and why God created him or her? At least let them start on an equal playing field of power. We're not doing that. We're stripping away the dialogue. We're hiding it. You know, we're hiding it. And it's time to wake up. I mean, I think if you're a Christian, if you're a conservative, it's not just about being angry and spouting up. It's time to figure out what the solutions are and start trying to implement them in your schools. Love people into your side, you know, of into your side of thinking, you know. I mean, it's what God does. He loves us so much, but he tells us the truth. He loves us so much, but he sets limits for us and rules for us. He loves us so much, but there are boundaries, and we need to fear him if we go way outside of those boundaries, because there are consequences for our actions. And I think, you know, what you're saying, Raj, is, you know, there have to be consequences, and those consequences aren't just about that one little girl. They're about a generation that's watching. And I think what we do with this particular story, this case with the violence that's, you know, just gripping our children, you know, what we do with it's really important right now, because it's going to determine in large part our future, you know, as a community and as a nation. So I just, you know, thank you guys. We could talk about this. We could go on about this for a lot more. There's a lot more to unpack about this. But for now, you know, unless either one of you wants to leave us with something, you know, I'll peace out. But yeah, thank you.
Well, I have one thing. May God
Sure.
help us where our conscience has become seared. Like, we got to start with us.
Yeah.
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 May God
Yeah.
help me, you know.
Absolutely. Well,
And you know, the problem with having a seared conscience is you don't know it's seared.
yeah. Well, I know it's seared when you ask me to watch the Keanu Reeves movie that you and my son love so much. What's it called?
I have to take this.
Okay,
call.
we're gonna let you peace out, Boudreau. What is it called? What's it called? Oh, come on. You know what
Hello?
I'm talking about, Roger. You just don't want to say it. The
John Wick.
Yes, John Wick. Yes. I know
He's trying to
consciences are seared
he's
when
trying
John
to get
Wick.
out. He's trying to get out of, you know, being a hitman. He doesn't want to be a hitman.
Yeah, anyway. Let's own it. Let's come
All
on,
right.
own it. You raise your kid on that, what do you get?
No,
And
but
that's just,
that's
no,
yeah,
we're we're laughing about it, but truth is truth. And I think we as believers have to really own a lot of stuff. We patronize things we shouldn't patronize. We tolerate things we should be intolerant of. We tolerate people we should be intolerant of. And we certainly don't understand God's love the way that we should, because God does not love the way humans love. God's love does have rules. It does have boundaries. It does have a police force. It does have borders and limitations, because God is about order, and order is about love. Order is about healthiness. Someone said to me, it's so interesting, the comment they made. A lot of people move to these really conservative states, like Californians and New Yorkers. I mean, do you think they're all going to move back when they realize how people are there? And I'm sitting there thinking, looking at this person thinking, you don't really know how conservative I am or how Christian I am. And let me tell you something. A lot of people moved out of the cities in the last few years to go to places like Florida, Tennessee, and Texas, conservative, quote unquote, Christian states. Guess why? Because life is better. And why is life better? Why is life better? For the most part, because Christians still have Christian schools and prayer in school there, because people still love their neighbor. They come and help and check on you if they haven't seen you in a few days, or if they know your husband was in the hospital. Neighborly American values. We are a country that was founded on scripture and godly principles. And we've gotten very far away from that in trying to prove that we're not a nation that was founded on, godly principles and Christian values. Well, I got news for you. Judeo-Christian values. That's what this country was built on. And if we don't get back to them, God's going to give us what we want. More of what you keep thinking works that is not working. I'm Cynthia Garrett. Thank you for joining me. We'll see you next episode.